Hello, here's an interesting figure, 50,000 people. 50,000 people, more on that later, but first, grab your popcorn, let's go to the movies. In Melbourne recently, Topher Field premiered his new documentary, Battleground Melbourne. This film documents and records what went on in the streets of Melbourne and throughout Victoria in 2020 and through into 2021, the dark days, the lockdown days. It's a fantastic film and it's been well received and already recognised in a number of festivals. So this film has been released just prior to coming into the next state election in Victoria. And let's take a look at the polls because they might give us some indication of who might be going to win this election, hard fought as it will be. So what are the polls saying? Let's take a quick look. Well, Roy Morgan has published a poll showing that 60% are favouring the Andrews government, the Victorian Labor Party, the Andrews government, 60% to 40%. But it's not all plain sailing. There are some contestants. Ian Cook, whose business was destroyed, the Sludgate affair, if you're familiar with it, is running against Daniel Andrews in his own seat. And he's saying it's not a matter of right or left, it's a matter of right and wrong. And he's running on an integrity ticket, a platform of integrity, calling out the corruption of the Andrews government and calling for a change. And there is a mood for change. There's a lot of other pressure points on the Andrews government, and there are other fronts of alleged corruption as well. So they're in for a contest, but the polls, as we say, 60-40. So there is a mood for change, but is it fair? Because the Andrews government's been there a while, as I say, and they've done a lot of things. Let's take a quick look at their record. We'll start with promises. Promises not kept. Who could forget the promise of 4,000-bed ICU? That was made in April 20. Take a look.
I don't rule out Melbourne Convention Centre. I don't rule out the exhibition buildings, whatever it might be, a really big space. I think I've been asked this a few times. I'm not confirming that today, but I certainly don't rule out building something that is a standalone conversion of a big space into what would be one of the biggest intensive care units in our country, perhaps anywhere in the world.
Well, the ICU facility hasn't been built, and when the state health system groaned under the extra pressure, the Andrews government was very quick to go into blame gear and point the finger at those who are medically non-compliant as causing the problems. Rather than deliver the solution as they promised, they blamed other people. But here we are, despite the Andrews government being in power since 2014 and Daniel Andrews himself being a health minister prior, he has not delivered on that promise. So we don't have 4,000 beds, we don't have adequate health facilities, and we are short on frontline workers in health. So that's the situation. That's the promise not kept. But there's more. This is a government that's been at the vanguard, at the forefront. They've led the way. They've been progressive. They put the progressive in progressive. Let's take a look at their achievements, their firsts. The Andrews government was the first to join the Strong Cities network, putting Melbourne forward as a strong city. The Andrews government was the first to fire rubber bullets on peaceful protesters. They were first to imprison someone for free speech, for charging them with incitement and alleging incitement, and those charges have now been dropped, by the way. They were the first to arrest somebody for posting on social media. In fact, it was a pregnant woman arrested in her home. So they've really been at the forefront. They were the first state to terminate teachers for medical non-compliance and then reinstate them because of teacher shortfalls. And of course, they were the first state to codify state emergency powers into law, giving them ongoing authority and control through that legislation. So these guys really have been progressive. They've done a lot of firsts, they've broken some promises, but they've been up there. So what about this 50,000? Well, this 50,000 is the 50,000 people who have left the state, moving to other places to live, fleeing Victoria for a better life, similar to Blue State Flee in the USA, where we see people leaving Oregon or California, moving to Texas and Florida and so on. They've left Victoria looking for a better way of life. Well, they're clearly moving into election mode because we've just had an apology from the CHO, perhaps that's a first. They've put on the We're Reasonable People shade of lipstick, and they've even offered cash incentives for study to frontline health workers who are under huge duress and stress. Maybe that's a little bit of appeasement. So maybe they're not so sure they're going to win. They're trying to look like they're good people and get re-elected. But the opposition, there's not much of it. The Liberal Party, the other major party in Victoria, they're not looking particularly strong. They're lacking flavour, they're lacking strength, they're lacking direction, and hence the 40% perhaps in the polls. But people would look at the Liberal Party and say, come on, this is a time for you to push back. Even Hillary agrees with this.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about.
But an opposition party without the strength, without the policies, is a little bit like a beer without alcohol. What's the point? And perhaps this is why the 40% is showing up in the polls. So what will Victoria look like if the Andrews government is re-elected in November? The Topher Field documentary records what happened in 2021. There are charges and allegations of corruption. There are people who have got discontent and disquiet in their souls about the culture and where it's going. It's not the most livable city, Melbourne, anymore. What will it look like? How many people will leave the state? Who knows? I'd suggest it's going up, not down. And here's an opportunity for people to vote, to make their voices heard, and to say what they want out of the great state of Victoria. Let's keep an eye on it. Thanks for watching.